Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is SAVIOUR Epoxy, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do an epoxy board repair with my epoxy kits. Preparation is key. So grab your sandpaper, this is a 120, and sand around the area. Making sure you lose any loose bits of glass, fiberglass or carbon, whatever the construction is, and you create a little pitted area around the repair. So once you've done that, you need to mix up some epoxy to fill the hole wherever the ding was. We use Surf Clear Evo, which is specially made for board manufacturing and repairs. In my kits, I have a specially formulated epoxy called green epoxy, which is super clear, super hard, and a super easy mixing ratio. The mixing ratio is 2:1. So simple. I'm just going to put 10 millilitres of epoxy and 5 millilitres of hardener, which I'm going to show you here, and give it a good mix up. Top tip, always pour this out when the cup is at an even level. So this is just a hardener going in now. So as I said, I put 10 epoxy in, and now this is 5 millilitres of hardener. So get your mixing stick, give it a good mix, making sure you get around the whole of the outside, and in the bottom, mix this really well. Now you can see that the epoxy is quite thick here, it's because it's not the warmest day here, but as it warms up, it does get a little bit more water-like, but this is absolutely fine. This epoxy has to be cured anything over 15 degrees. So because I'm filling a hole in this board, first of all, I need to make a paste. And to make a paste, I mix the epoxy we just mixed up with some Q-Cell, which also comes in a kit. So you want it a nice texture, kind of gloopy, so when you put it in a hole, it doesn't immediately just slip out. So I'll put some in here and I'm just mixing it around. So I think that's a bit too runny, so I'm going to put a bit more Q-Cell in, give it another mix. And that's kind of the right consistency, what you want. So put some in the hole where you want to fill. Grab your squeegee from the kit. And make sure it's squeezed right in the hole. And a little bit excess around it also. And smooth it off. And any excess from your pot you can dispose of. If not, you can reuse the cup afterwards. So a top tip on this is, as it is quite a cold day and this epoxy may run as it's curing, if you get a bit of masking tape and pop it over the top of your repair onto the epoxy, it will hold it in place until it's cured. Right, so we've come back to this now, 12 hours later. It should have cured. Not really sure why I've got the epoxy in my hand, but I have. Let's take the tape off that we put on yesterday. And it should have cured underneath, should have go rock hard. If it's not rock hard, that means your ratios when mixing your epoxy earlier wasn't correct. But this is hard, so I'm going to continue. So again, grab your sandpaper, and I'm just using my hand here to sand it flush with the board. It sounds really easy with the Q-Cell in there, so don't take too much time. but make sure you don't sand all of your epoxy off and you keep a good shape here. And all you're doing really is preparing now for your glassing stage. So you always put glass on a ding if the ding is bigger than a 5p piece. So I'm happy with all the sanding's done and I've cleaned it off. So now I'm preparing for the glassing stage. So just like we did before, mix up some epoxy. You do 10 and 5 again. So that's 10 epoxy, 5 hardener. Mix it up like you did before. But this time we're not going to add any Q-cell because we don't need to fill the hole. We now want this epoxy to saturate the fiberglass, which also comes in a kit. So you now need to prepare the area where you're going to be glassing. I always put a bit of masking tape around the area, a little bit wider than where you want to glass. And you'll see why later when I'm sanding. So any ding, really, you want the glass to overlap, you know, like 10 to 20 mil to make sure your epoxy doesn't fall out. So your glass actually holds it in there and stops it cracking. So I'm going to use 2 bits of cloth or fiberglass cloth, I sometimes call it cloth, and that is 6-ounce cloth. So you make one piece of the glass smaller and one larger, and that's called feathering. So you've got your epoxy mixed and you've got your glass ready. So what you want to do is put a little bit of epoxy on the board like this. So when you put your glass on in a minute, it sticks to it. So the smaller bit first and then the larger bit. Pour some epoxy on there, let it saturate for a second, use your squeegee and spread it out. So you want to make sure all the glass is saturated and there's no white bits of the glass left. So I'm aiming to saturate the fiberglass inside the tape area. Anything outside the tape area doesn't matter, it's going to get sanded off. So all good. Now you will have to leave this again for about 12 hours before you come back and it'll be ready to sand. So I'll come back to it, it's rock hard, which is all good. So now grab your sandpaper, the one that you were using earlier, and give it a good sand. You see that I'm mainly concentrating on the edge of it. And if you've got a sander, happy days, it's even easier. But you don't have to have a sander, it just takes a little bit more effort. Again, sanding, but not too much in the centre, mainly around the outside. But you are flattening off the centre as you go along. Remember, if you sand all this off, your structure's gone, so be careful not to sand too much, but sand enough. And now for the last stage of the repair. So this is some epoxy I mixed up from another repair, but mix it up as same ratio as we did earlier. Pour a little bit on there and get your squeegee and pull it across the repair. And all you're trying to do here is seal any pinholes, any low spots, and put in a protective waterproof film over the top. So like I said, this is the last layer of epoxy that goes on here before trying to tidy it up at the end and spray it. So nice and smooth is best. Yeah. Again, 12 hours later, come back to it, get some 240 sandpaper, which is a different grade of what you've been using before. And then I like to sand this while it's got water on there. So you put water on there so it just sands much easier. So it actually doesn't take very long for the 240 to sand the top layer of epoxy. And what you're aiming for here is to get this nice and smooth and flat. So you see that I'm rubbing my other hand over the board after I've sanded it. So if you can feel it, you'll be able to see it. So get that to a very good standard. Once you've done all that, make sure you clean the area, make sure it's all dry. Tape up any logos you don't want covered in spray. Make sure there's no lumpy bits. And I'm using the MTN white primer to spray the board. So always prime the board before you spray the board, just to cover the bases and make sure it's all nice and flush. And now this is a white spray going over the top of the primer. And as you're spraying, just feather it out nice and even, not too much so it gets runny. Better off doing thin layers rather than too thicker layers. Voila, your repair is done. So you can take your tape off. Always run your hands over your repair after, make sure you can't feel it. If you can't feel it, you can't see it. So there you go. This is the finished article, looking good. The customer was very, very happy. I really appreciate you guys watching this. Hopefully you've learned something. Don't forget our kits are available on our website. And please like and subscribe to this channel because there's going to be plenty more of these videos. And trust me, you guys will need them. Have a good one.